great guest for you guys now. Igor Volsky, he is executive director of Guns Down America, also the author of Guns Down, How to Defeat the NRA and Build a Safer Future with Fewer Guns. Igor, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. So a lot of conservatives say, oh, these libs, they want to get rid of all the guns. You're the one coming closest to that. So it's usually not the case, but in your case, kind of. So what do you want to do with the guns?
Well, I think we need fewer guns. I think the only way to really save lives is to set a long-term goal of building a future with fewer guns. And in the book, I talk about how we can get there within the confines of the Second Amendment. But what really I think gets at me in this entire conversation, even some of my colleagues in gun control world, is we're always so afraid to say what it is we really want. And I think that this strategy that we've had for the last 20 years of trying to meet folks in the middle and trying to wrap everything in like this is just a small little reform has really failed because there's nobody on the other side to build any kind of coalitions with. And so I argue we need to be bold and we need to ask for what we need, which is a world where we don't have more guns than people.
Okay, so I like that kind of talk. So that safe centrist talk drives me nuts. I might even go further than you. I think the Second Amendment gives you a lot of rights if you're in a well-regulated militia.
That's the history of it. That's the history of it.
And it's also the plain language of it. So Scalia hates plain language, or he did when he was alive, reading of it. He hates original intent. He hates all the things that he claimed that he was in favor of, all the right wing do. If you cared about the actual text of the Constitution, the only way you're allowed to have guns is if you're a part of a well-regulated militia, and you're not, so just live with it. But unfortunately, we have very scared Democrats in this country. They've been scared for 40 years, and so they never fight back. So now let's talk about, in this particular case, what are the actual policy proposals that you want them to fight for? So
in the book, I lay out a Second Amendment compact, but I really think of it in 3 different buckets. So the first thing you gotta do is crack down on the gun industry. Right now, the federal cap is machine guns. So as long as you're not producing machine guns for the civilian market, you could do whatever you want. And what we've seen over the last decade, and even the last 20 years, is the gun industry had a real problem. How do we market guns to a populace that already has a lot of guns? Well, we know, they said, we'll make them more dangerous. And so that's where you got assault weapons, that's where you got militarized handguns that use the high capacity magazines, these semi-automatic pistols that use larger rounds, that are coming at you faster, that are killing folks who would have survived past generations of handguns. That's a major problem. It's because of a federal loophole. We have to close it. We have to regulate firearms.
Yeah, hold on, let me just stop there for a second. So, for folks who don't know, what's the difference between a machine gun and an assault rifle?
The main difference is that with a machine gun, when you pull a trigger, you get multiple rounds at once. With a semi-automatic weapon, each pull fires out a bullet. That's really the difference. But when you attach to an assault weapon a large magazine, that means you could shoot a lot of bullets pretty efficiently and kill as many people as efficiently as possible. And as we know, that's really what mass shooters do in public mass shootings.
And the shooting in Vegas was an unfortunately example of bump stocks, where you could actually then convert assault rifles into, in essence, machine guns.
That's right, and there's there are bump stocks that are now banned, but there are also all kinds of devices that the industry produces in order to constantly solve this problem. Its market share and its customers have so many products. How do you get them to buy more? You continually try to innovate to make them deadlier, and we allow for that to happen under federal law. That should not be the case. So that's kind of the first bucket, okay?
So do you think that they're meeting a demand of like a bunch of gung-ho guys who are like, oh, I want the bigger bullet and I want it to fire faster, et cetera? Or is there some element of, well, they want to sell to criminals too, and criminals need more deadly weapons, and the more that the criminals have weapons, number one, they just sold a gun, what do they care? And number two is, or an assault rifle. Number two is it makes everyone else scared and need to defend themselves, but by buying even more weapons.
Well, look, certainly, maybe it's a combination of both. I mean, what you have is not only these more dangerous weapons, but you also have pretty irresponsible marketing tactics that are going on. You may remember a couple of years ago, Bushmaster used to sell assault weapons under the label, "Your man card reissued." And when you got your assault weapon, it came with an actual man card that I guess you could pull in your wallet and then show all of your friends that you were a real man. I mean, this is a real marketing technique to young men and to continue to make this link between masculinity and gun ownership. And that, of course, also enlists that audience in the continued fight against gun control, because it kind of lays into the sense of who you are as an individual. It's not just about a gun, it's about your self-worth, it's about your self-identity, and that's really part of their success over all these years. They've been able to tap into that.
If you need a physical man card in your wallet to prove your masculinity, I don't think that solved it.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that didn't solve it. Okay, so now, and in terms of the magazines, is there limits on how many bullets a magazine can hold at this point?
There are various kinds. Some are higher than others. So you can, when you go into a store or you go online, you really have a lot of choices.
Okay, gotcha. All right, now second policy.
So second bucket really deals with ensuring that gun owners can prove to their neighbors, can prove to their communities they could handle a gun responsibly. And what I mean by that is you get a license, you register your firearm, and you get insurance. And those are the kinds of reforms we've seen in some states in America. 9 states have some degree of firearm licensing. But most importantly, overseas, where they've been much more successful in reducing gun deaths by adopting these kinds of reforms. And what they really focus on is raising the standard for gun ownership. Because folks say this a lot, the folks who are running for president say this a lot, our politicians say this a lot, that all we really want to do is take guns out of the hands of dangerous people. And we, in 2019, should know what that means, right? I don't want to take your guns. I want to take guns from those other dangerous people. That's a real problem morally, but it's also a real problem because it doesn't work. In every other nation, nobody divided their populace between responsible gun owners and dangerous people. What they did is they changed the entire environment in which guns are produced by regulating that piece of it, regulating the supply, and in which guns are purchased. And by doing that for everybody, the so-called responsible people and the so-called dangerous people, they made everybody safer. So that's really a framing point that I think all of us in talking about this issue need to get into.
Look, part of the problem is how the hell would you know if they're a responsible gun owner or going to be a responsible gun owner? So I guarantee you, and I'll lowball it here and say at least 80% of the mass shooters, if you had taken their guns ahead of time, the NRA would have jumped down your throat, go, what are you doing? Look at these liberals. They're seizing people's guns. This is a good student at a school, responsible gun owner. He doesn't have a felony on his record. Of course he should be able to buy these weapons.
And it's not just the mass shooters. I mean, this kind of division of good guy, bad guy, or just taking the guns of dangerous people doesn't make sense in a country where 2/3 of gun deaths are suicides.
Yes, that and of course, less guns equals less suicides. We have an enormous rate of suicides by gun in this country, far outpacing all other countries. On the idea of insurance, et cetera. So cars have insurance, but guns don't have insurance. That makes no sense. And licensing, like I need a license to drive a vehicle, but I don't need a license to fire bullets that murder people. And so, what is the response that they have? I know that they say, oh, they're gonna do a registry and snatch your guns. But to be fair, when we did insurance and licensing for cars, I remember when the government came and took them all. That's why nobody has cars.
LA, people are walking all over the place. Well, on that registration piece, and they say that a lot, right? It's just the beginning of mass confiscation. We've been registering machine guns in this country for decades. They're not outlawed, they're just incredibly well regulated. We have a registry, we know that there's over 600,000 machine guns in civilian hands. But because they're well regulated, when was the last time you heard of anybody using a machine gun to commit any kind of murder? I looked actually at FBI statistics to see if we could tell. They don't even have a category for machine guns because it's so rare. But on the licensing point, I'll tell you, and in this book, I talk about going out west and shooting guns at this great big gun range. And after this 2-day really intense exercise, was actually able to find common ground with some of the folks who ran that facility, who said, yes, if you're gonna have a gun, then you better go to a police station, get fingerprinted, pass a written test, pass a field test, go through a much more comprehensive background check than what we have today. Wait a period of time and then get a gun. That's kind of the system that they have in Massachusetts. And Massachusetts, as we know, have some of the lowest rates of gun deaths in America.
Igor, look, I know a decent amount about this issue because we cover it, unfortunately, almost every day on the show because of all the mass shootings. But I did not know that about machine guns, that there were 600,000 machine guns in the country. And you're right, we never have any machine gun deaths.
We never do.
You know why? Because sometimes regulation works.
Yes.
So that's a great point. But we're gonna run out of time, so I wanna make sure we get to your third bucket.
So the third bucket really deals with urban gun violence, right? Because what we know about urban gun violence is that it is really comes at the hands of a small group of actors in the city. They're responsible for most of the gun deaths. And so there have been all kinds of successful programs here in California, elsewhere, that work with folks on the ground as crime and violence interrupters to change the behavior of those at-risk individuals who are committing most of the gun crime. And those programs have been successful in reducing gun deaths. And so I call in the book for really funding those programs on the federal level in a real way so that you could scale them, so that they could survive administration changes on the city level, and so we could have real gun violence reduction.
Okay, everybody pick up the book. It's called Guns Down because you're gonna learn a lot from it. And by the way, Igor's already had a number of successes in people like FedEx, companies like FedEx, not working with the NRA anymore because of the activism that he did. And look, here's another stat I didn't know. How many people die every day in America from gun deaths? Every day, that's, I thought a lot, 10, 20, maybe 30. No, 96 people every single day in America die from guns.
It's actually 100 now, by the way. When I was writing this in 96, now the estimate is 100.
Unbelievable. We have got to take action right now. Igor, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so
really
much, appreciate it.
Yep. On the go? Don't worry, we got you covered. You can still listen to TYT at our new podcast network. Find us on Apple Podcasts, the Google Play Store, or at tyt.com/podcast.